Good evening. My name is Carol Penning, liaison for the Bolingbrook Historic Preservation Commission. Our subject tonight is the history of the Fountaindale Public Library. Libraries are the memory of mankind, the storehouse that contains all which is known and has been thought. The local public library is a reflection of its community, indicating its commitment to education, culture, family, values, basic human freedoms, and historic preservation. By recording the history of the Fountaindale Public Library, we will gain an understanding of the growth and development of the community that it serves. Historically Speaking is a one-hour program hosted by the Bolingbrook Historic Preservation Commission and Bolingbrook Community Television. It's an informal program, a program where a panel like the one here this evening gathers to talk about Bolingbrook history. To document the rich history of the development and growth of the Fountaindale Public Library system in the village of Bolingbrook, to share photographs, documents, and memorabilia of the Fountaindale Public Library. Through the interview, hopefully to document the memories of the people involved in the Fountaindale Public Library movement through the years before those memories are lost. And of course, to enlighten our village and government bodies about the services, programs, and value of the local library. Tonight, I'd also like to mention that we have members of the Historic Preservation Commission in the audience, and we're happy to be here today and share a little bit of information and talk about the exciting library that we have that's located in our community. It's just a wonderful jewel in our community, and I'm so excited to have the people that are here with us today. So I would like each panel member to share some information about who you are, how long you've been associated with the library, and in what capacity. Peggy, would you start?
I sure would. I'm a 38-year resident of the village of Bolingbrook. I've served in the library for 15 years now. I actually served for 4 years in the 1980s, and then I came back in 1998, and I've served ever since. I was elected president of the board in 2003, and have maintained that position throughout several elections now. I also am a retired teacher from the Valley View School District. I retired in 2004. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. Paul?
My name is Paul Mills. I'm the new executive director of the Fountaindale Public Library District. I assumed that position in July, and I'm tickled pink to be here. I've always admired the Fountaindale Public Library ever since I became a librarian, which is 16 years now, which is starting to make me feel a little bit old. And I'm very glad to be here as well.
Well, it's good to have you, and what an exciting time for you to be a part of the Fountaindale Public Library.
It is.
And Karen?
Yes, Karen Anderson, and I started working at the Fountaindale Library a week after I moved here in 1978. Wow. Barely had gotten settled, and I had the wonderful opportunity to start my job at the library, working for one of our other panel members, Todd. And we worked together for probably 19 years. So I've been there a good part of my life, love this library, and fortunately in 2003 I was able to become the director of the library and carry the library through the referendum.
That's great.
Yeah.
Karen, see, it's so nice having these discussions because I just found out that you moved in Bolingbrook around the same time I did in 1978.
1978, yeah.
Long history. Hilary.
Hi, I'm Hilary Rosenthal. I was elected to the library board in 1976. My husband Ed was pretty active in the village at the time. So I decided in self-defense I was going to get out of the house and do something. I was at home with one small child at the time. Had another one shortly after, which was actually a legitimate excuse for missing a board meeting. She was born on a board meeting night. I was able to serve on the library board for 25 years, wow. Which went by incredibly quickly for me, including a term as president. I was on the board when the Friends of the Library was established, and was very proud of being on that board because, as Paul said, the Fountaindale Library has an amazing reputation among librarians throughout the country as really being on the cutting edge of what's good about library service. Oh, and my most recent connection with the library was being part of the committee that chose the art for the new library.
Oh, it's beautiful. Okay, Alex.
I'm Alex Todd. I became the second director of the Fountaindale Library on March the 1st, 1975, and retired on June the 30th, 1997. I oversaw the growth of the library from 1,100 square feet in Parkview School to two 48,000 square foot buildings. It was a very challenging career. It was fun. There was never a dull moment, and I thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it.
Thank you, Alex. I have a list of questions, and I'm going to ask them, and I would like anybody on the panel to jump in and say, and afterwards, if you'd like to add, please do. We're going to talk about the early days of the library service in Bolingbrook. And my first question is, what group or individual was responsible for the first public library service in your community?
I'll answer that one.
Okay, Alex.
Library service, at least the story I was told when I was hired, was that Romeoville had been established, I think, in 1959 and Bolingbrook in 1965. And the JCs in Romeoville ran a public survey of what do you most miss out here in the boondocks after you move from Chicago. And the overwhelming answer was a public library. So in 1969, a referendum was held under the auspice of the JCs, and the Fountaindale Library, or a library district, was established by, I think, about a 3-to-1 vote. Then came the naming of the library, and the name Fountaindale relates to where the East Branch and the West Branch of the DuPage River come together, and they're apparently back in the early 1800s. There was a fur trading post called Fountaindale, and Jim Bingle, who was very active in Bolingbrook and all the local history, submitted that name, and among all the other ones that were there, that obviously was the best that was picked. Then the library was established in 1,100 square feet of the old Parkview School. I mean, there was still an active school, and somehow they had an extra room, and that's where it started. They passed a building referendum, again, about 2-to-1 in 1972 for the grand total of $2.8 million. And with that, they built 2 buildings. And why 2 buildings? Because they would never have passed a referendum if it was going to be in Romeoville. Bolingbrook would have said no. If it was in Bolingbrook, Romeoville would say no. If they had said we'll build one between the two, which today would be the obvious place to put it. But so they, for the first time in library history, 2 identical buildings were built. They went under construction in 1973. The first contractor went bankrupt. And when I got here in 1975, 2 buildings were partially completed, and I had the job of finishing both buildings. So Fountaindale probably really began, we'll say, as what it's doing now in 1975.
Okay, would you please repeat again, what was the space of the first actual building? What were the space?
The first actual building was in the Parkview School, 1,100 square feet.
And then the square footage of
Of the 2 buildings,
Yes.
48,000 each of the 2 buildings.
48,000. Okay.
And Carol, what I remember when I got on the board shortly after the construction of the 2 buildings was a lot of empty shelves. There were times that I would go into the children's department and whole areas were just blank. There was nothing there. And there was a limit on the number of books you could take out. But obviously moving from such a small space to 2 buildings that had to be filled with books. It took a while for the collection to catch up to the space.
But the library didn't occupy all 48,000
That's
square
true.
feet to begin
That's
with.
true.
This Valley View School District had their offices, administrative offices, in the basement at Romeoville. And in the basement at Bolingbrook, we had classrooms for Joliet Junior College and the offices of DuPage Township. So it really became kind of a shared community building. But as the
Good
library,
Governmental cooperation.
It was.
very good
In
government.
fact, the school district helped the library in the beginning. They gave the library district the land for the 2 buildings. In return, they were given rent-free use of the lower level at Romeoville for a period of 10 years.
10 years.
So it was a good deal for both. They had a new modern office, and we got the land for the buildings.
And the library didn't really need all that space.
No.
And it was around the 80s that we started moving into the basement of Bolingbrook. And around that same time, Joliet Junior College had built their North Campus, so it was an easy transition. And DuPage Township had their new building, so they were ready to move out as well.
That was my first experience with the library, downstairs at the Bolingbrook Library, because I taught for Joliet Junior College at night, and I taught classes there. So when I looked around, I thought, oh, that's pretty nice, you know? That truly got me interested. Of course, then I had my daughter, and then that makes all the difference in the world,
Yeah.
because the library is where a child wants to go.
That's right.
And Hilary mentioned about empty shelves, and especially in children's, that was true. In those days, book salesmen would come around, and they would come in, and we'd say, we'll take everything you have. They'd shake their head, and if you have more, we'll take more. I mean, we just could not keep books on the shelves.
Okay, there was something interesting that you said, and I don't know how many. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to library board individuals, but I did not realize that about Jim Bingle. And Jim Bingle, for the people that are going to watch this show, it's important just to mention that Jim Bingle had a long history in our community, and it's interesting how community leaders played a part. Jim was a member of DuPage Township as a tax assessor, and he also wrote for the Bolingbrook Historical Society. He wrote books, history of the community. And it's just interesting, you know, that he, which I didn't know again, which was very enlightening, that it was his idea for the name of the library.
Right.
So I loved hearing that. That was great. And I wanted to ask each of you, you know, we're talking about early memories, but also I'd like to ask you for recollections or stories about the library history. I mean, do you remember any interesting stories or things that transpired through the years that you want to share? Or
Well, I could talk about how we didn't develop video cassettes. My philosophy was that when it came out that why should we compete with local business, and then a certain board member went to conference and brought back the cassette. I think it was Officer and a Gentleman, and said, "Here, we now have a collection of one."
And I think I actually remember that myself, because we all sat, the rest of the board sat there and went, very quietly, very quietly. We didn't want to make any special feelings for Mr. Todd, but we went, yes, I do remember that. That was in the 80s.
Yeah.
does anyone have any other stories? Anything
What
interesting?
kind of stories you want to
Just
hear?
Yeah, there are lots of stories. Well, you know, when the new library opened, one of the big concerns the residents experienced was parking. And in the old library, when Joliet Junior College was a tenant, that was one of the big concerns was parking. So people in our community drive where they need to go. You know, they're in their cars. And one of the challenges for any shopping center, restaurant, library, whatever, is to have parking to accommodate everybody. So it was a problem many years ago, and now with the large parking lot, though, I think the library's pretty set.
Have it resolved.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Peggy.
Just one more thing. I mentioned having my daughter, and that was 1975, so by 1980, you know, kindergarten. What I remember is the little kids at the library every afternoon before she went to kindergarten, or in the afternoon when she did, morning and afternoon sessions. There were so many children in that library for the story time, take out books. It was just amazing. And that's partially because Bolingbrook was a very young community at that point. Not to say that we're not still, but very, very young. And the children were the highlight.
Children's programs. And some of those same children have grown up to adults, and they live here in Bolingbrook, and now they're bringing their children to the library. And that was one of the sad things. People would say, oh, I used to come here as a child, when they saw the old library being demolished. But they were excited because they could bring their children to this new library. So, but yeah, we have second generation story time, maybe third generation for all I know, yeah.
One of the things I remember from the early years too, I did mention that Fountaindale has always been kind of cutting edge. Well, it was also cutting edge with putting the catalogs electronically rather than hard catalogs. And I remember many people walking in and just being very confused, looking around for the card catalogs and not believing that there were no card catalogs there.
Yeah.
So.
And
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, wasn't Fountaindale one of the first libraries to go to an automated circulation, like 1977?
Yes, we were the fourth one in the Gaylord system, and I think the third one in the state.
Yeah.
And Fountaindale actually beat the regional library system at the time in the late 70s to automate. Fountaindale automated before a group of local libraries automated, so Fountaindale set the trend early for doing new and different programs.
And we also, in the beginning, early on, checked out personal computers. Remember the Commodores?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think they had 8 kilobytes, or even what? And we also checked out Polaroid cameras.
Yeah.
Another thing, the wave of the 70s was framed art and statues.
Yeah.
Yep.
We had quite an extensive art and statue collection. I don't think any of that's left.
No, but if you're going to say something about Commodore computers, I have to say I was a proud employee who had an Apple IIe and thought that was just the greatest thing to do the library's accounting on. Yeah,
You know, computers have come a long
way.
I
Yeah.
have to refresh my memory. You started talking about the early art, but I do remember at one time you could actually take art out.
Yes,
Yeah.
oh yes.
So
You
you
could check
could-
out any of it.
But like framed, I mean,
Right.
large
Yep.
pictures and everything, so you hang it up on the wall,
Right.
for having a little party.
When you got tired of it, bring it back.
Bring it
and another one.
I think it was a 6-week loan period, so you could kind of get comfortable with it in your house. 6 weeks maybe, and then you had to return it.
Our current tax assessor, John Randall, I know is a huge, huge fan of books on tape, and probably as long as you've had them there, has been going there and has always raved about that.
Right.
Yeah, I've always had a long commute to work, and that those have been staples that I've checked out all the time. And
We've gone from books on tape to books on CD to now we have playaways where you simply plug them into the auxiliary jack of your car stereo and there's no moving parts. It's just that type of memory that you can listen to it that way.
It's just amazing.
But the desire to listen to a story hasn't changed. It's just the tools have changed.
That's really great. We're talking about the materials. I'd like to just dabble a little bit into funding. You know, how were the materials gathered or purchased for the first library in the community? How many materials do you remember it having, and how was the operating budget of the first library? I mean, yeah.
First budget when I got here, I believe, was in the order of about $250,000. To open the 2 buildings, from the time the district was founded, they were buying books, but putting them in boxes and putting them in storage down in Joliet. So when we opened the Romeoville building, a moving van came up with books and out of the van, and also across the parking lot from Parkview School. And I think we started on a Friday and opened on a Monday. There were still books down there for the Bolingbrook building, and when we opened in, I believe it was
September?
June or July, that we got into the building, And the books didn't move in quite as easily till finally September. We decided this is it, one final push, and we'll be open. And I think we opened in early September. But they'd been buying books all along. But I say the first budget was about $250,000, and that had to cover everything for 2 buildings, the staff, the works.
Thanks, Alex. You know, I want to just ask all of you if there's people that have been in the library that have served, you know, and I'll go back in history, like the first librarian or custodian of the library. Just people you want to mention that have been there a long time, you know, served, memories of people that have been part of the library.
Well, Karen has been
Yes.
a long time employee. There were several clerks. Anita Spatero was one. She lived in Romeoville, but worked at the library for a good 20 years. Marion Baker, who was head of circulation in Romeoville, started out in the old building and stayed with the new one until she retired, I think, somewhere around 2000 in there. So no, there were long-time employees. In the beginning, there was quite a bit of turnover. As Peggy said, it was a young community. We'd hire clerks, and their husbands in 6 months or a year would get transferred, and we'd be bringing in new clerks. So in the beginning, there was quite a rapid turnover. By the time I left, that had sort of settled down, and people were in it for the long haul.
Yeah. When I became director in 2003, there were 19 people who had worked for more than 20 years.
Wow, that's really
So,
great.
And I
people
have to say
stay.
that the feedback that I always got back on the library didn't really have to do with the building, didn't really have to do with the materials. It always had to do with the staff and how warm and welcoming the staff of the library was. And I always thought that that was really the secret that kept, not so secret, but that's what kept people coming back. Not just that we were offering truly excellent service, but that they could connect with staff members who really made them feel at home.
We really found that out too when we were working in the new library. When we were talking to the community members, that's the first thing they said, was that the staff of Fountaindale Public Library is excellent. There is no other place that has a staff like this library does. And you said you have a great deal of longevity. That also translates back to the people who they keep coming back and back to the library and who support it and whose children support it.
I just have a little observation because we're going to transition from history to what's going on currently, but you know, being across the street, the Village Hall, you know, I get to watch traffic and see what's going on with the library. And, you know, I always thought the library was busy with the old building, but I am just so impressed with how active the library is now. I mean, that parking lot is always full. There's always people going. It makes me so happy, you know, to see that kind of activity.
Carol, before you go, I do want to mention 2 employees, because currently we do have
good.
one
Thank
employee
you.
who's coming up on like 29 years
good.
still at the
Thanks,
library.
Karen.
But another good employee who passed away recently is Mary Pocoy. And I just like to mention her because she loved the library, and I just think that would be good. And Peggy might want to mention a trustee who was very active in the referendum and in the library, Dave Hargett. And unfortunately, Dave did not live to see the new library open, but he's definitely there in spirit and in her memories. And I know it's hard for Peggy to talk about it, as hard as I'm talking about it. When you lose good people who were very much part of the library's history,
Very committed.
it is hard. And as far as the staff, you are right. The staff gets a lot of compliments. And years ago, you know, we had a lot of Bolingbrook residents who might have moved to other communities. And those residents would come back to use Fountaindale Library because the staff was so exceptionally helpful.
That's really
So it's a real testament to the people that work there. And,
something to be proud of.
very
And
much
I just
so.
want to mention in reference to Mary, since you brought her up, Mary and her daughter both served on the Historic Preservation Commission.
That's correct.
So it was nice that she had that involvement at the library, but also was a part of the Historic Preservation Commission. Peggy?
Just as a side note to what Karen said, truly Bolingbrook wasn't a revolving door. Okay, people came in, whether they were transferred or not, many of them moved to some of the other neighboring communities. And in just the last 6 months, meeting people at the new library, I've heard people say, well, you know, I moved to a different suburb and I came back. I live here now. So that just tells you something about the services throughout our community.
Right.
Certainly the library, but other services
Other
as well,
services
because
as
people
well.
have come back.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to segue into, as your library grew up, how did you begin your process to this new building?
Well, I'm going to start out in 2003. The previous director left our employee and went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we turned inside and looked at our own personnel and chose Karen Anderson to be our new library director. Along the way, we had already been hearing throughout the community that, you know, this is a really nice library, we love the staff, but. We need more room, we need more space, we need more materials, and I think it's important to say that the library that was built and opened in 1975 was built for about 35,000 people. And by the time we got to 2003, you know, we're talking about 65,000 people. So that is showing you that we really had a lack of space, a lack of materials, and people noticed it because more and more would come in and say, oh, well, we have to get this, we have to get that. Well, you know, we don't have the space right now, but we can work on it. So I'm going to ask Karen. We had quite a lengthy trail to our referendum that was successful in 2008. We actually started out in 2004, and part of that was Karen's leadership. When she became director, she said, you know, I'm hearing as much as you are, except I'm here every day, and I hear people's comments, and I'd like to study it. So Karen, you want to
Sure.
pick up here from
One of my first tasks as the new director was to do a long-range plan. And so I decided to follow the Public Library Association's planning process. It's always good if you've got a plan or a way that you're going to approach this. And they recommended having a citizens advisory committee. So we put together a group of 25 residents, and we asked them to commit to 8 hours of meeting to talk about the library. We had 2 sessions, 2 4-hour sessions. And at first we thought, you know, nobody's going to do this. They're way too busy. But you'd be surprised. Oh, yes, when? And the first night was a cold night in January. We had a facilitator. All 25 people showed up. The energy in the room was phenomenal. I was totally amazed at just how nobody held back. And all we heard was more books, more programs, more parking, more quiet areas, just more. Well, the next 4-hour session was a week later. And during that week's time, one of our members, and he's also a member of our historic preservation, Dave Pardall, he decided to go visit some other neighboring libraries. So he came back to the second session, as did all 25 members. And that was my other fear, was at the second session, you'd see a drop off. Everybody was back. Dave was back, and he had been to some other libraries, other communities. And he came back and he said, folks, we've got some work to do. He had seen what libraries can be. He had seen Schaumburg and Palatine and some of the libraries that had built larger facilities and had larger collections. You know, we had a wonderful library in 2003. It was small, but services were everything we could do with the space we had. So it was clear to me, and I will never forget that evening when the whole group was just like, we want a new library. And they just loved the library, they loved Bolingbrook, and they wanted to see improvements. So that started everything, the long-range plan. But then a very careful, deliberate process continued. We did a telephone survey. We wanted to measure what the residents, how receptive would the residents be to a new library through a referendum. We did a site analysis we brought in architects to see could an expanded library fit on our current site. We did a space needs analysis. Okay, we know we need more books, more space, more, but how much space do we need? You know, you need some data. You need data to go to the public. So we had a space needs analysis. We involved the staff, we involved the board, we listened to the residents. And really, if you go back to those 2 meetings, the residents were the driving force. I could tell Peggy, the residents are saying this. Peggy could tell the board, but we were really getting the message from the residents. I think I'm forgetting, we did the telephone survey, the sightings. I think that was in my...
Focus groups.
The focus groups. So then as we got closer into, yes, we're going for this referendum, we wanted to hear from the residents, well, what do you want to see specifically? What do you want to see in this new library? What kinds of features? So we had focus groups of business people, parents, high school students, teens, seniors, and then just a mixed group of residents, you know. And from those focus groups, we got lots of information about what people were looking for. That's kind of how everything came together. But if you can see, you really had the residents behind you at the very beginning.
That's really great. What I want to ask is a description of some of the new services or programs now that you're in that space. You know, tell me a little bit about that.
Could I just jump in for a
Sure,
second and
please.
talk about the referendum?
Yes.
We did have community meetings, as Karen said, and the board was there, and they were televised. So when the community members were there asking questions, the board would answer them. We had interviewed several architects. By that time, we had an architect on board. And there was one person in particular who stood up at every meeting and said, we really need a new library, and I'd like to do whatever I could. That was Dave Hargett.
Yeah.
So as time went on, I assure you, I made him do everything he said he could. So, but the referendum itself, we had talked about it, you know, like I said, for, well, really the last year, 2004, 5, 6. So in 2007, we had to make the decision. And because the primary election for 2008 had been changed by the state from April to February, we were really treading water real quick.
Yeah.
So in November of 2007, the board did vote to put the referendum on the ballot. And so when we found out that the election was changed, I said, oh, I think we probably need a citizens committee here because the library staff could only give information on a new library and the services that we could provide for them. But for a yes vote, you need to have a community group put together. So a young man by the name of Dave Hargett once again answered my call, and I said, how would you like to head up a Citizens for the New Fountaindale Library? And he said, of course. So that's what we did. We put together a group of 11 people. Doesn't sound like very many. And we had a budget of about $5,000, which also wasn't very much, but we made it work. And we produced a brochure of our own that requested a yes vote from the people of the village of Bolingbrook. We knocked on doors. At this time, Romaville was still a portion of our district, that library, so we knocked on some doors in Romaville. And we sent out letters, we made some phone calls. All in all, in the actually 2.5 months, we did a lot of work.
Yeah.
And every person on that committee had a special job to do. And there wasn't a one that didn't come through. So I need to tell you that we, as a community group, put the referendum committee together. We made it work. We made it work for $5,000. And we had signs and we had brochures, and we talked to the residents. And as you know, the first vote that came, the first counting of the votes that came through, the day of the election, which was February 5th, 2008, we had lost by 35 votes. It's awful.
It's awful.
However, we had absentee ballots and we had provisional ballots. These are people that may have gone to the wrong place to vote because of their change of polling places. But at any rate, by the 19th of February, when everything was added up, we passed with 49 votes. So that was pretty exciting. And then we really had to dig in because, oh, now we passed. Oh, my goodness, we better start getting busy on this. Is that correct?
We were ready. We
Yeah,
were
we were
ready.
ready,
We
but-
were ready.
But the idea was we'd kind of coasted for those 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, wow, this is so extraordinary. It's almost hard to believe. So I do want to put this in for a second. The referendum actually wasn't a $48 million referendum to start with, and we'd kind of mentioned the two communities, Bolingbrook and Romaville. By this time, Romaville had grown up to a community of about 38,000, of which we served only a small portion. So when our referendum was on the ballot, the people of Romaville did not like the referendum because they were not going to get a new building. They were going to get a refurbished building. And Bolingbrook was going to get the new building. You know how it's gone back and forth over the last 40 years. So make a long story short, we were contacted by the library district that did service most of Romaville and asked if we would be interested in working with them and perhaps transferring the territory. So by August of 2008, we did just that. We went to the courts, and the library district at that point was Des Plaines Valley Library District. Today it's called White Oak Library District. And we transferred our portion of the library districts in Romaville to White Oak. So what that did was the $48 million then, the $5 million, which would have gone to Romaville's building to refurbish it, was dropped. So the people of Romaville were never charged anything for any bonds. So it became a Bolingbrook library. And I also need to say this too, since we've talked about the voting now, that 49 votes that we won by was the total for both communities. If you look at the total votes for the village of Bolingbrook, we passed by 710. So if you split the actual number of voters, that's about 10% of the vote of Bolingbrook said additional, so that they wanted to have a new library. So I think we feel a lot better about that.
Sure.
Because what it shows is that people
The community.
of this community wanted a new library, and they're willing to vote for it, and they did vote for it. And so their wishes did come through.
That's great. That's really great. And now both communities have their own library, and we
Right.
have
Right.
communities, Bolingbrook the size of 73,000, and Romeoville still growing.
Still growing.
You
Right.
know, it's good that it's serviced that way. Makes it nice for each community's residents. So our program is nearing the end, so I wanted to get a little bit more conversation about, things like the size of your library collection, description of your new services and programs, now that you have more space, to do more things. You talk about some of those, Paul?
Carol, I'd be happy to do that. And our new building really is a realization of the dreams that the present board, past board, and past directors had put into place. We now have a 96,000 square foot facility on 3 floors. Our collection is over 300,000 items.
Wow.
And most importantly, and this is something that is a legacy to me that is entrusted to me that I have to build on, our library was recently named one of the Library Journal Star Libraries in the nation, one of only 18 libraries in Illinois to get that designation. And that is a reflection on the current board, the past board, and the past directors who built that strong service ethic. You get this designation as a star library really primarily based, yes, on the services you provide, but more importantly on the way you provide those services and the quality of those services. And that doesn't happen overnight. That's something from years and years of nurturing by the board and administration to create an excellent staff, which is what we have. And that excellent staff now has a superior building to provide services in our community. In addition to our large collection size, we now have over 25 computers in the children's area, where we used to have 5 in the old building. Our total public computers are now over 100, where we had around 35 in the old building. In our children's department, we now have a beautiful dedicated storytime room that when librarians from other libraries come to visit, they rave and rave over it. And it's one of the things that's my most favorite aspects of the new building. That storytime room is something else. We have a creativity park in our children's department where kids can come and they can explore and they can create. You know, we've talked both now and in the past about collections, and that is a very important thing of what libraries do. But just as important is we're a place where people can come of all ages to dream and to imagine a new future and to pursue what makes them happy, which in a lot of ways makes us a patriot's dream of what the library provides to its community. We have expanded spaces for people to study, both in small group study rooms and larger meeting rooms. We have a business center devoted to our business community where they've got a more private area with additional resources beyond our regular public computers where they can work on projects at a more leisurely pace and with some privacy. We have a local history room dedicated to the history of our community that has a combination of all of those historical artifacts we enjoy, but also the latest technology to help you use them. It truly is, as I think Peggy and others have said, a true jewel in our community. And I am a very, very lucky man to be the executive director right now.
Oh, it's pretty exciting. And Peggy, did you want to?
I just wanted to mention the art collection. Hilary did serve on that committee. We put it together in the summer of 2010. And we had 2 members of the community. Phyllis Mayer was one, and Hilary Rosenthal was the other. They both represented the Bolingbrook Art Council. We also had 2 members of our own staff, Wendy Burkmeyer and Sabrina Smallwood, and 2 trustees, myself and Gail Grasky. And what we did was look at various forms of art because we wanted to have different media throughout the library. And Tom Jacobs from the Owner Services Group was our contact. So needless to say, we did have a special opening on the 27th of October that showed off our brand new piece. We have 13 pieces throughout the library, and then Markian Olignik was an artist that was commissioned to do a Bolingbrook piece. And one of the Bolingbrook Historical Commission, Karen and I both went and talked to, she was a member at that time, and I asked the commissioners what they would like to see. And one of the things that Judy Bradaway, who was a member of the commission, or is a member of the commission, said, well, if you're going to do a Bolingbrook piece, why don't you think about doing it on the 4 seasons? And that's what it is. So it's partially things that you can identify, it's partially abstract, but it covers the 4 seasons, fall, winter, summer, spring, summer, okay?
Peg, I'm going to try and hold it up. I don't know if the camera will be able to get it, but we will make sure that there's pictures available as a part of this program that shows a better idea of what the piece of art actually looked like. It's really quite stunning.
So we had a special unveiling, which was partially a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and also open up to the public through our website, asking them to please attend. We had the artists there who created the different pieces of art throughout the library. And we heard from our residents, we heard from the patrons, we heard from the artists how wonderful it was that they had the opportunity to interact. I think it's also important that all of this art is open for the 72 hours the library is open during the week. They can come and view it, and it's almost like Paul said about all the library facilities in our collection. You come to dream, you come to imagine, you come to see what you are, how you can become something that you already are, but to portray yourself, how you can continue in your lifelong learning. That's what it's all about.
I wanted to add 2 things about the art committee and the art collection. We were really conscious of the diversity of the Bolingbrook community, and we wanted the artwork to reflect that diversity in subjects, in media, in styles. And I think that the committee did a really pretty good job of putting that together. The other thing is maybe a little bit more of a plug. There were many, many pieces of art that we would have loved to have included, and we decided that perhaps some generous community members would want to step up and perhaps as a legacy to the community, finance some of the other pieces of art. So there is still that opportunity for somebody to do that, and I think we said that they'd have their name attached to
Oh,
it.
yes, they would be given credit for being
Either
a patron.
the business or the individual who wants to contribute to the expansion of the art collection. That's going to be an opportunity for people within the community.
This art cannot be checked out.
But you can see it on our website. If you like,
Yeah.
we've created a virtual art gallery of our art pieces with commentary from the artists about how they created it and what it means to them. So if it's 2 a.m. in the morning and you're in the mood for art, you can get that at your 24/7 library, our website.
And in fact, I explored it a little bit the last time I renewed my materials online, which is something else you can do.
I did want to say one other thing about the name. We've talked about Fountaindale and how the name came about. When we built the new library, we wanted to have that idea continue. So it's still the Fountaindale Public Library, but when you come into the lobby, there are stepping stones that are to make you feel like you're walking into water, all right?
Water.
And then you look up and you see on the wall we have computer-generated different lights, and they change light as the time goes on, from green to yellow to blue to purple, as water would, water falling down like this. So
Beautiful.
we kept the theme and we enhanced the theme so that people coming in would get not only this feeling of this gorgeous building, but also the feeling of place, time, and memory.
Can you give just a quick description of where the pieces that you were first talking about that you just dedicated, where it is in the building and the size of it? Because I know it's very big.
It goes between the second and the third floor. So when you come up and you go up the elevator, you'd go straight ahead, kind of jiggy-joggy to the right, and it's on the wall. It's on an inside wall, though you can look out the outside and see the light, okay? And maybe you could give a better description. There's a wall barrier there, okay?
Yes, and it really, as Peggy said, you can see it very well from the second and the third floor. I like looking at it from the second floor because then you gaze up to it, which again kind of goes back to our theme of dreaming and aspiring to something greater. And I think that's one thing that piece of art does for you. It grounds you in what our past is as a community, but also where we're going to go.
I'm going to just mention a few of the design inspirations. You mentioned the 4 seasons from bottom, spring, summer, autumn, winter. It's 3 sections of the DuPage River from the Forest Preserve to Pilcher Road. The trees that are incorporated are blue ash and white oak. The Bolingbrook flag is in there. A Place to Grow, written 3 ways on a children's chalkboard, Braille, and the binary code. The original Village Hall, Route 53, I-55, and I-355, Village of Bolingbrook, represented by 1-inch square bevels, Westbury Subdivision, Clough Airport, Hidden Lakes, the state of Illinois and Lake Michigan, the sports, because we're such an active sports community, soccer, baseball, football, basketball, golf, cricket, and hockey, state symbols, the cardinal, the bluegill, monarch butterfly, white-tailed deer, violets, blue, big blue stem grass, oak leaves, acorns, tree ring, and 5 inspirational words. I know believe is one of them, I believe. What are the inspirational words? Do you remember? There's 5 inspirational words in
I
there.
think one is inspire, one is believe, one is imagine,
Dream.
dream.
Yeah, I think that's.
Okay.
Well, it's just a
I remember.
beautiful, beautiful piece, and we'll have that available. We're getting near the end here, And I wanted to give everybody an opportunity, you know, if there's anything else that you want to add before we conclude. Is there anything you want to, each of you, is there anything you would like to say, or
Well,
I don't want to
during-
miss anything?
During the time that I was director, you know, we did have a cramped for space, but we compensated by going out into the community. And during that time, the library set a standard that's continued of being involved in so many community events. So no matter what it was, whether it was Park District, Health Fair, or something here at the village, you would see the library and library staff and perhaps the bookmobile. And that continues today. So even though we're drawing more people into the library is still very much out in the community. And the library received the Chamber of Commerce Community Service Civic Award for the Best of Bolingbrook Business, which, you know, we're
great
really
honor.
great honor and a great recognition for what the library was doing during those years.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
What I'd like to say, and what I plan to continue for my future plans for the library are to continue the excellent level of service the Fountaindale Library has always provided to the Bolingbrook community. The technology changes, the tools change, but our core values of being the best library we can be to our community continues. And the best way we can represent that is by continuing to hire and nurture the best staff in any library that I've ever seen.
It's great, Paul. I've enjoyed meeting you and working with you, and I look forward
Likewise,
to our
Carol.
continuing working relationship. Peggy, anything?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is it's really been fun for me to be at this meeting because of all the people who are sitting here. I've either served with you as a trustee, served with you as a trustee of the village, the library, or you were my directors when I was serving as a trustee. So it's this has been a very fun evening for me.
It's fun.
And I would like to bring up the fact that we do have 7 trustees for the Fountaindale Public Library, and all of us are very active in the community. And we were also active throughout this whole process of listening to the community, of looking at an architect firm, choosing the architect firm, choosing the plans for the building, and then working for the completion of the building, and now enjoying the fruits of our labor and the labor of our staff. So it's been a wonderful opportunity for me, and also for all the other trustees, for the staff of the library, especially to be invited here to do this history. Thank you very much.
That's great. Hilary?
Well, I also appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel. And I actually thought I'd have nothing to say because my service went back so far. But I want to conclude with 2 things. One is we haven't mentioned that the new building is up for LEED certification, and those of you
Yes.
who are aware of environmental activism know that that's a really big deal, and that's another example of a way in which Fountaindale has always been on the cutting edge. The second thing I wanted to say is all of us obviously have vested interest in promoting the Fountaindale Library, but I really invite anybody who's watching to come into the new building if you haven't been there already, and I dare you not to be totally impressed.
Odd is the word.
And Alex?
Well, I too am glad to be on this panel to bring some of the ancient history of the library. It has come a long way in 42 years, from a referendum to 1,100 square feet to 2 buildings to now 1 building. It's brand new and really a beautiful building. And as Paul has mentioned, it's the contents and everything is fine, but it is the staff that really makes a good library. And over the years, Fountaindale has always had a great staff.
Thanks, Alex. The Bolingbrook Historic Preservation Commission will request that a history of the library be added to the already wonderful website. So with this great talent of Alex and and Karen, and maybe we can just have a little section that you can just click on, and it says the history of this great library. And I want to mention the library's website is www.fountaindale.org. It's an awesome website, it really is. And I'd like to thank everyone here on the panel for sharing the history of the Fountaindale Public Library. And finally, remember, you do not know where you are going unless you understand where you have been. Thank you. It was very nice, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.